The silver ship hung in the darkness between stars like a sleeping giant. Captain Rithmos stood on the bridge of the Harmony's edge, his tall, pale figure casting long shadows under the soft blue lights. His people, the Villani, had traveled far from their home world to meet these strange new beings called humans. "Captain," said his communications officer, her voice like wind chimes in his mind. The Villani did not speak with their mouths when they could help it. Their thoughts flowed freely between them, shared and open like water in a stream. The human vessel approaches. Rithmos felt the excitement ripple through his crew's minds. For 300 years, the Villani had searched the stars for other thinking beings. They had found many creatures, some smart, some not, but none had the spark of true intelligence that could touch minds with theirs. Until now. The human ship was different from theirs. Where the Villani vessel curved and flowed like a living thing, the human craft was all sharp angles and hard metal. It looked like it was built for war, not peace. This worried some of his crew, but Rithmos kept his mind calm and steady. "Send them our greeting," he said, both out loud and in thought. "Tell them we come in peace." On the human ship New Dawn, Kang Day straightened his blue diplomatic uniform and checked his translator one last time. He was a big man with broad shoulders and hands that had seen both battle and peace. His dark eyes were calm, but his aide could see the tension in the way he held himself. "Sir," said Dr. Lee Yuna, the team's scientist. She was small and quick, with bright eyes that missed nothing. "Their message is strange. It's not just words, there's something else with it. Like they're trying to touch our minds." Kang Day nodded. The reports from the outer colonies had mentioned this. The Villani were telepaths. They could read thoughts and share feelings across space. It made some humans nervous, but Kang Day had seen worse things than aliens who could peek into minds. "Prepare. The meeting room," he said. "And remember, we're here to make friends, not enemies." The two ships moved closer together in the vast emptiness of space. Soon, a shuttle from each vessel would meet in the space between them. It was an old tradition, one that showed trust. Neither side would have the advantage of fighting on their home ground. High Priest Veltar prepared himself in the sacred chamber of the Villani ship. He was ancient, even by his people's long standards. His skin was the color of moonlight, and his eyes glowed with a soft inner fire. For over 1,000 years, he had served as a bridge between minds, helping his people understand the thoughts and feelings of other species. "Are you certain about this, old friend?" asked Captain Rithmos as he entered the chamber. "These humans are different. Their minds feel closed to us." Veltar smiled, an expression both kind and confident. "That is exactly why I must try. In all my years, I have never met a thinking being whose mind I could not touch. These humans intrigue me. What are they hiding behind those mental walls?" "Perhaps those walls are there for a reason," said the captain softly. "All walls can be opened by those who know how," Veltar replied. "And I have been opening minds since before you were born." The meeting took place in a small chamber built into the connecting tunnel between the two ships. The room was simple, with a round table and chairs that could fit both human and Villani bodies. The air smelled of metal and the recycled breath of two different species. Kang Day entered first, followed by Dr. Lee Yuna and two other members of his team. They moved with the careful grace of people who had trained for this moment. The humans wore simple clothes in blue and gray, colors chosen to seem peaceful and non-threatening. The Villani came next. Captain Rithmos led them, his tall form elegant and strange. Behind him walked High Priest Veltar, moving with the slow dignity of great age. Two other Villani completed their group, their pale faces calm and curious. "Welcome," said Kang Day, speaking slowly and clearly. "I am Kang Day, representing the Human Colonial Authority. We are honored to meet you." Captain Rithmos bowed slightly, a gesture his people had learned meant respect to many species. "I am Captain Rithmos of the Villani Exploration Fleet. This is High Priest Veltar, our most honored mind reader. We too are honored by this meeting." Dr. Lee Yuna stepped forward with a small device. "This is a universal translator. It should help us understand each other better." "We thank you," said the captain, "but perhaps we can do better than words alone. High Priest Veltar has a gift that could help our peoples truly understand each other." Veltar moved forward, his ancient eyes studying the humans with interest. "With your permission, I would like to touch your mind, Kang Day. Not to invade or harm, but to share understanding. When minds connect directly, there can be no lies, no misunderstandings. Only truth." Kang Day felt his team tense behind him. They had talked about this possibility during their long journey. The decision had been left to him. He looked into the alien priest's glowing eyes and saw only kindness there. "I agree," he said simply. Dr. Lee Yuna started to protest, but Kang Day raised his hand. "If we're going to trust each other, we have to start somewhere." Veltar smiled and moved closer. He raised his long, pale hands and placed them gently on either side of Kang Day's head. The human felt a strange, tingling sensation, like electricity running through his skin. "Do not be afraid," Veltar said softly. "I will be gentle. I will only look at the surface thoughts, the peaceful ones. I will not go deep." Kang Day nodded and closed his eyes. He tried to think of simple things. His home, the blue skies of Earth, the mission of peace that had brought him here. Veltar's mind reached out, confident and sure. He had done this countless times with countless species. He would touch the surface of the human's thoughts, read his intentions, and confirm that these people came in peace. It would be simple and safe. The connection formed. For a moment there was calm. Veltar saw images of Earth, blue and green and beautiful. He felt Kang Day's genuine desire for peace between their peoples. The human's mind seemed normal, like any other intelligent species. Then Veltar tried to go a little deeper, just to understand better. He hit the wall. It was not like anything he had ever experienced. Not a natural barrier, but something built, something made. A wall of terrible purpose that did not just block his mind, but pushed back. Behind it, he sensed vast darkness. Not evil, but something far more frightening. Something that made him want to run screaming into the void. Veltar tried to pull back, but found he could not. The wall was not just keeping him out, it was pulling him in. He felt his mind being dragged into spaces that human thoughts were never meant to visit. Into places where Kang Day kept things that no living being should have to carry. The priest's scream echoed through both ships. Veltar's scream cut through the meeting room like a blade. The ancient priest collapsed to the floor, his pale hands clutching his head as inhuman sounds poured from his throat. His body shook and twisted as if something inside him was trying to claw its way out. Captain Rithmos rushed to his friend's side, his mind reaching out to touch the priest's thoughts. What he found there made him stumble backward in horror. Veltar's mind was no longer his own. It was filled with images and words that belonged to the human but twisted and wrong, like looking at a reflection in broken glass. "What did you do to him?" the captain demanded, turning on Kang Day with fury in his glowing eyes. The human diplomat stood frozen, his face pale with shock. I didn't do anything. I just stood there. I let him in." Dr. Lee Yuna was already moving, pulling out a medical scanner from her pack. "Let me help. I'm a doctor." "Do not touch him," Captain Rithmos snapped. "You have done enough." But even as he spoke, Veltar's screams changed. The sounds coming from his mouth were no longer in the Vellani language. They were human words, spoken in languages that Dr. Lee Yuna recognized: Korean, English, Mandarin, languages that the priest had never heard before today. "How is he doing that?" she whispered. On the floor, Veltar writhed and spoke in broken, human speech. "No, cannot. The children. Fire from the sky, so many dead." His voice cracked and changed, becoming deeper, then higher, as if different people were speaking through him. Captain Rithmos felt panic rising in his crew through their mental link. On the Vellani ship, every person with telepathic ability was feeling echoes of Veltar's pain. Some had collapsed at their posts. Others were weeping for reasons they could not understand. "We need to get him to the medical bay," the captain said. "Now!" The meeting ended in chaos. The Vellani carried their priest back to their ship while the humans watched in helpless confusion. Captain Rithmos ordered his vessel to move away from the human ship, but not too far. He needed answers, and the only ones who had them were the people who had done this to his oldest friend. In the medical bay of the Harmony's edge, Healer Zixara worked over Veltar's shaking form. She was young for a Vellani, only 200 years old, but she had studied the mind longer than most. Her pale hands moved over scanning devices that showed the priest's brain activity in patterns of light. "This is impossible," she said to Captain Rithmos as he watched from beside the bed. "His mind is not just damaged, it has been changed. There are new pathways here, new connections that should not exist." "Can you fix him?" the captain asked. "I do not know. I have never seen anything like this." She paused, studying the readings more closely. "Captain, these new pathways, they are not random. They are organized, structured, as if someone built them there on purpose." Veltar's eyes suddenly snapped, open. They were no longer the soft, glowing orbs of his people. They were dark and hard, like human eyes. When he spoke, his voice was different too, rougher, deeper. "You don't understand," he said in perfect human English. "None of you understand what they are." Healer Zixara stepped back in shock. "High Priest, how do you know that language?" Veltar sat up slowly, his movements strange and jerky. "I know it because he knows it. Kang Day. I am still connected to him, still seeing through his eyes. Do you want to know what I see?" Captain Rithmos felt fear creep up his spine. In all his years, he had never been afraid of Veltar. The priest was the gentlest soul he had ever known. But this thing wearing his friend's face was something else entirely. "Tell me," the captain said. "Humans do not think the way we think," Veltar said, his voice growing stronger. "We share our thoughts freely because we have nothing to hide. Our minds are open books, filled with light and truth. But humans Humans have learned to lock parts of themselves away. He turned to look directly at the captain, and Rithmos saw something terrible in those dark eyes. Understanding. The kind of understanding that came from seeing too much. They call them walls, but they are more than that. They are prisons. Cages, built inside their own minds to hold the things they cannot bear to remember, the things they have done, the things they have seen, the choices they have made. Healer Zixara checked her instruments again. His brain patterns are stabilizing, but they are completely different from before. It is as if he has become part human. Not part human, Veltar corrected. Part monster. That is what they are, you see, all of them. Every single human carries a monster inside their head, locked away behind walls of will and necessity. You're wrong, Captain Rithmos said firmly. The human Kangde seemed peaceful, kind even. Veltar laughed, and the sound was full of pain. Oh, he is kind. That is the most terrible part. Do you want to know what Kangde did before he became a diplomat? He was a soldier, a killer. He has ended more lives than there are stars in our home system. The captain felt the blood drain from his face. That cannot be true. It is true. I have seen his memories. I have felt his hands pulling triggers. I have watched through his eyes as entire cities burned. And do you know the worst part? He was right to do it. Every death, every choice, every terrible thing he did was necessary to save others. Veltar stood up from the medical bed, moving with human gestures that looked wrong on his alien body. That is what humans are. They are creatures who can carry the weight of necessary evil and still smile, still love, still hope. They split themselves in two, keeping the monster locked away so the person can function. Elder Quintal entered the medical bay, his ancient form moving slowly. He was older than even Veltar, and had lived through the darkest days of Vellani history. I felt your distress through the mental link, he said. What has happened here? The humans broke him, Captain Rithmos said simply. No, Veltar said, turning to face the elder. They showed me the truth. We have been living in the light for so long that we forgot there could be darkness. But humans were born in the dark. They learned to carry it, to use it, to lock it away when necessary. They are not broken. They are strong in ways we cannot imagine. Elder Quintal studied the priest with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. You speak of them as if they are to be feared. Not feared, Veltar said quietly. Respected. Do you know what it takes to kill 1 million people to save 10 million? Do you know what it costs a soul to make that choice and live with it afterward? We could not do it. We would break first. But humans find a way. Captain Rithmos felt a chill run through his mind. What are you saying? I am saying that we are children playing at being adults, Veltar replied. And we just met our parents. The priest walked to the window that looked out at the stars. In the distance, the human ship waited patiently. They are still there, he said, still trying to be diplomatic, still hoping for peace. Even after what happened, they want to try again. That is what makes them so terrifying. Not that they can be monsters, but that they choose not to be. Healer Zixara looked at her readings one more time. High Priest, your mind is still connected to the human. Can you break the link? Veltar was quiet for a long moment. I do not think I want to, he said finally. For the first time in my life, I understand what strength really means, and I am afraid that if I let go of this connection, I will forget. We will all forget, and that would be a tragedy beyond measure. He turned back to face them, and Captain Rithmos saw that the priest was no longer screaming. He was simply sad, deeply, terribly sad in a way that reminded the captain of humans. "Send a message to their ship," Veltar said. "Tell them we want to try again, but this time we will be ready for the truth." Dr. Kim Minho arrived on the New Dawn 3 days after the incident. He was a small, quiet man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. As the ship's new psychologist, he carried a heavy bag filled with files that no one else was allowed to read. Kang Day met him at the airlock, still shaken by what had happened to the alien priest. "Doctor, thank you for coming so quickly. We need your help understanding what went wrong." "Nothing went wrong," Dr. Kim said simply. "Something went exactly as it was supposed to. That's the problem." They walked through the ship's corridors to the main briefing room, where Dr. Lee Yuna and the rest of the diplomatic team waited. Captain Park Jun-ho, the military escort commander, stood at attention near the door. His hand rested on his weapon, even though there was no immediate threat. "The Villani want to meet again," Dr. Lee said as they sat down. "Their priest, he's different now, changed. But he says he understands something important and wants to explain it to us." Dr. Kim opened his bag and pulled out a thick file. "Before we meet with them again, you need to understand what you're dealing with, all of you." He looked around the room at the confused faces. "What do you know about Kang Day's service record?" "He's a diplomat," Dr. Lee said. "Former military, but that was years ago." "Former military," Dr. Kim repeated. "Captain Park, tell them what Kang Day did in the war." Captain Park shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, that information is classified." "Not anymore," Kang Day said quietly. "They need to know. All of it." Dr. Kim opened the file and began to read. "Colonel Kang Day, formerly of the 15th Orbital Strike Division, commanded the destruction of the Kepler Station Rebellion. Casualties: 1.2 million civilian and military personnel. Later commanded the defense of New Seoul during the Outer Colony Wars. Authorized the use of nuclear weapons against 3 separate colony worlds. Total casualties: 8.7 million. The room fell silent. Dr. Lee stared at Kang Day as if seeing him for the first time. You killed all those people?" "Yes," Kang Day said simply. "I did." "But you're so—" She struggled for words. "You're kind, gentle. You joke with the crew. You bring me coffee when I work late." Dr. Kim closed the file. "That's exactly what I'm here to explain. Humans don't work the way other species do. We don't share our thoughts freely like the Villani. Instead, we build walls, compartments. We lock away the parts of ourselves that we can't live with." He turned to face the group. "Every human in this room has done things they regret, made choices that hurt others. But we don't let those choices define us completely. We take the guilt, the pain, the necessary evil, and we bury it deep inside our minds where it can't poison everything else." "That sounds like madness," Dr. Lee whispered. "It is madness," Dr. Kim agreed. "But it's functional madness. It's how we survive in a universe that forces us to make impossible choices." Commander Jin Hana entered the briefing room at that moment. She was tall and sharp, with the kind of face that never smiled. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, and her eyes were the color of winter ice. "Dr. Kim," she said with a nod, "I've reviewed the incident reports. The alien priest accessed Colonel Kang's secured memories?" "More than that," Dr. Kim said. He experienced them, felt them as if they were his own. The Villani mind isn't built to handle that kind of psychological weight. Explain, Commander Jin said, taking a seat at the head of the table. Dr. Kim stood up and walked to the wall screen. With a few touches, he brought up a diagram of the human brain. The Villani are telepaths. Their minds are open, sharing thoughts and emotions freely. They've never needed to develop psychological defenses because they've never needed to hide anything from each other. He highlighted different areas of the brain diagram. Humans evolved differently. We learned to compartmentalize, to suppress, to lock away memories that would destroy us if we had to live with them every moment of every day. Like what? Dr. Lee asked. Kang Day spoke up. Like watching your best friend die in your arms because you made a tactical decision that saved 1,000 others but cost him his life. Like ordering a strike on a hospital because you know enemy soldiers are using it as a base. Like having to choose between saving a busload of children or a medical facility full of patients, knowing that either choice means people will die. His voice was calm, but his hands shook slightly. The Villani priest didn't just see those memories. He experienced them. He felt what it was like to make those choices, to carry that weight. And his mind couldn't handle it. Commander Jin leaned forward. What exactly is in those locked memories? Dr. Kim brought up another screen, this one showing psychological profiles. Everything we can't afford to think about. War crimes committed for the greater good. Civilians killed to save other civilians. Friends sacrificed to complete missions. Children left behind because saving them would compromise operations that would save thousands of other children. He paused, looking at each person in the room. Every human soldier, every police officer, every doctor, every leader carries these burdens. We make the hard choices so others don't have to. Then we lock the memory away and try to live normal lives. Dr. Lee was crying now, though she didn't seem to notice. How do any of you live with yourselves? Very carefully, Kang Day said. With help, with therapy, with the knowledge that someone has to make these choices, and if we don't do it, someone else will have to. Someone who might not be strong enough to carry the weight afterward. Kim nodded. That's what the Villani priest discovered. Not that humans are evil, but that we're strong enough to do evil things when necessary and still remain functional. Still love our families, still work for peace, still hope for a better future. Captain Park spoke for the first time since the meeting began. Sir, should we be telling them all this? About our psychological defenses? Commander Jin was quiet for a long moment. The Villani priest already knows. The question is whether we can help them understand it without breaking more of their people. Dr. Kim sat back down. That's why I'm here. I specialize in trauma therapy, in helping people process experiences that their minds aren't built to handle. If we're going to have a relationship with the Villani, we need to teach them how to protect themselves from us. Protect themselves from us? Dr. Lee asked. Think about it, Dr. Kim said. To them, we're walking psychological weapons. Every human they meet has the potential to break their minds just by sharing memories. They need to understand what they're dealing with before someone else gets hurt. The communication system crackled to life. Captain Park, we're receiving a transmission from the Villani vessel. They want to meet again. The priest says he has something important to tell us. Commander Jin stood up. Dr. Kim, you're coming with us this time. We need someone who understands what happened to their priest. As they prepared for the second meeting, Dr. Kim pulled Kang Day aside. How are you holding up? Having your memories accessed like that? It can be traumatic. Kang Day was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about all the things he saw, all the choices I made. For years, I've been able to lock those memories away, pretend they didn't define me. But now, someone else has seen them, felt them. How do I look him in the eye knowing what he knows? The same way you look in the mirror. Every morning, Dr. Kim said. By remembering that you're more than the worst things you've done. That you made those choices so others wouldn't have to. That you carried that weight so others could live free of it. Kang Day nodded slowly. Do you think they'll understand? The Villani? I think they already do, Dr. Kim said. That's what terrifies them. They've spent their entire civilization believing that good and evil were simple, clear things. We've just shown them that sometimes good people have to do evil things. That's a hard truth for anyone to accept. As they walked toward the shuttle bay, Dr. Kim thought about the files in his bag. Every human on the ship had a psychological profile, a record of their traumas and coping mechanisms. Some were soldiers like Kang Day, carrying the weight of necessary violence. Others were scientists who had made discoveries that led to weapons. Doctors who had chosen who lived and died when resources were scarce. All of them were broken in some way. All of them had learned to function despite that. Brokenness. That was what made them human. And now they had to explain that to a species that had never needed to be broken. The second meeting took place in the same chamber as before, but everything had changed. High Priest Veltar sat across from the humans, his pale face marked by new lines of exhaustion and understanding. His eyes were no longer the soft, glowing orbs of his people. They were darker now, more human-like, as if something fundamental had shifted in his very nature. Dr. Kim studied the alien priest with professional interest. He had seen that same look in the faces of human soldiers returning. From war, the weight of terrible knowledge carried in silence. You came back, Veltar said in perfect human English. His voice was different too, rougher around the edges. I was not certain you would. We had to, Kang Day replied. We need to understand what happened to you. What's still happening? Veltar's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, but there was no humor in it. Still happening. Yes, that is accurate. The connection remains. I am still seeing through your eyes, Kang Day. Still feeling what you feel. Still accessing memories that were never meant to be shared. Captain Rithmos shifted nervously beside his priest. High Priest, perhaps we should disconnect you from— No, Veltar said sharply. Not yet. There is more to understand. Much more. He turned his attention to Dr. Kim. You are new. A specialist in minds, yes? I can sense it in the way you watch me. You see the damage and want to fix it. I see adaptation, Dr. Kim said carefully. Your mind is changing to handle information it was never designed to process. It's remarkable, actually. Remarkable, Veltar repeated. Yes, I suppose it is. Would you like to know what I have learned? In these past few days? What wonders and horrors live in the human mind? He stood up slowly, his movements more fluid than before, more human. At first, I only saw Kang Day's memories. His wars, his choices, his buried guilt. But the connection has grown stronger, deeper. Now I see more. Lieutenant Choi Sora entered the chamber at that moment, her security clearance allowing her access to meetings that others could not attend. She was young for her rank, with sharp eyes and the kind of stillness that came from years of training. Dr. Kim noticed how she positioned herself near the door, ready to act if needed. I see her memories too now, Veltar said, pointing at Lieutenant Choi. And his. He gestured toward Dr. Kim. And slowly, I am beginning to see beyond individual minds to something larger, something collective. What do you mean? Dr. Kim asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Veltar walked to the center of the room, his alien features animated with a terrible excitement. Humans do not just compartmentalize individual trauma. You compartmentalize species-wide trauma, cultural trauma, historical trauma. You have built walls, not just in your own minds, but in your collective consciousness. He began to pace, his movements becoming more agitated. Do you know what I see when I look into the deeper layers of human thought? I see the memory of your species learning to kill its own kind. I see the first human who realized that sometimes survival meant murder. I see the moment your ancestors understood that good and evil were not simple things, but complex choices that had to be weighed and measured. Captain Rithmos felt fear ripple through his crew's mental link. High Priest, you should rest. This is too much for... Too much? Veltar laughed, and the sound was bitter. I am just beginning to understand. Do you want to know what humans really are? They are a species that learned to weaponize empathy. Dr. Kim felt a chill run down his spine. Explain. You feel the pain of others, Veltar said, turning to face him. All of you. Every human has the capacity for deep empathy, for understanding suffering. But instead of letting that empathy paralyze you, you learn to use it as a tool. You suffer for others so that others don't have to suffer as much. He pointed at Kang Day. He carries the guilt of 8 million deaths so that 8 million families can remember their loved ones as heroes instead of victims. He takes their pain into himself and locks it away where it cannot poison their memory. Lieutenant Choi stepped forward slightly. Sir, this information is classified. Perhaps we should... Classified, Veltar said, his alien features twisting into something that might have been a grin. Yes, I see that too. Another human innovation. You have learned to classify not just information, but emotions, experiences, entire categories of human experience that are too dangerous for most people to know about. He turned to Lieutenant Choi directly. You know about the Omega Protocols, don't you? The plans for what to do if humanity encounters a species that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be negotiated with, cannot be allowed to survive. Dr. Kim felt the blood drain from his face. Even he didn't have clearance for that information. How do you know about... Lieutenant Choi began. I know because you know, Veltar said simply. And you know because someone had to know. Someone had to carry the weight of planning for the unthinkable, of preparing for the day when genocide might be the only option to save your species. Bars the room fell silent. Even Captain Rithmos, who had been growing more alarmed by the moment, seemed frozen by the implications of what the priest was saying. That is what terrifies me most about humans, Veltar continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. Not that you are capable of evil, but that you are capable of necessary evil, and that you have built an entire civilization around carrying that burden. Dr. Kim found his voice. You're talking about things that exist only as contingencies, plans that will never be used. Will they not? Veltar asked. I can see the calculations in your minds, the careful mathematics of when violence becomes necessary, when individual lives become acceptable losses, when entire worlds become expendable if it means saving others. He walked back to his chair, but did not sit down. Your species has survived by becoming the galaxy's conscience. You take on the moral burden of impossible choices so that others can remain innocent. You become monsters so that others can remain pure. Sage Mordun, who had been listening in silence from the Volani side of the table, finally spoke. If this is true, then humans are not just dangerous to individual minds. They are dangerous to entire civilizations. How many species could survive? Learning what you have learned? None, Veltar said immediately. That is why they hide it, why they classify it, why they build walls in their minds and in their culture. They are protecting the galaxy from the truth about itself. He finally sat down, his alien body slumping with exhaustion. Do you know what I found in the deepest layers of human consciousness? Hope. Despite everything they have seen, everything they have done, everything they know they might have to do, they still hope for a better future. They still believe that someday the hard choices won't be necessary anymore. Dr. Kim leaned forward. That hope is what keeps us human. Without it, we would become the monsters we sometimes have to pretend to be. Yes, Veltar said softly. That is what makes you so terrifying. You are monsters who dream of becoming angels, and you are strong enough to remain functional while carrying both possibilities within yourselves. Lieutenant Choi finally spoke up. Sir, what do we do with this information? If other species learn about human psychological capabilities, they will fear us, Kang Day said simply. More than they already do. Veltar nodded. But they should also respect you. Because what I have seen in human minds is not evil. It is sacrifice. The sacrifice of innocence so that others can remain innocent. The sacrifice of peace of mind so that others can sleep safely. The sacrifice of moral purity so that others can remain pure. He looked around the room at both humans and Volani. Your species has made itself into the galaxy's immune system. You are willing to become infected with moral complexity so that other species can remain simple and clean. That is not evil. That is the greatest good I have ever encountered. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Captain Rithmos spoke. What do we do now? How do we move forward with this knowledge? Veltar smiled, and for the first time since the connection had been made, there was genuine warmth in his expression. We learn to be worthy of your sacrifice, and we try to help you carry the burden instead of leaving you to bear it alone. The arrival of the Volani fleet changed everything. 12 massive ships appeared at the edge of the system, their elegant forms casting long shadows across the void. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Harmony, Grand Arbiter Yithkala stood, in silent communion with her people, feeling their shared distress through the mental links that bound them together. High Priest Veltar's mind pattern has been altered, reported her chief advisor. The contamination appears to be spreading through secondary telepathic contact. Several of our crew members who touched his thoughts have reported disturbing visions. The Grand Arbiter was ancient even by Volani standards. Her pale skin had taken on the translucent quality that came with extreme age, and her eyes held the wisdom of a dozen lifetimes. She had guided her people through first contact with 17 different species, but none had challenged their understanding of the universe quite like this. Summon their leader, she said finally. It is time we understood what these humans truly are. On the new dawn, Ambassador Nam Jiwon received the message with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She was older than Kong Day, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too many negotiations go wrong. As the senior diplomatic representative for the human colonies, the responsibility for this first contact ultimately rested on her shoulders. "They want a full diplomatic meeting," she told the assembled team. "All department heads, both sides. This isn't just about Veltar anymore. They're trying to decide if humanity is safe to contact." Dr. Kim looked up from his medical reports. "How is Veltar doing?" "Stable," Kang Day reported. "But changed. He's been asking to speak with one of our younger crew members, someone without military experience." "Why?" Ambassador Nam asked. "He says he needs to understand how normal humans carry psychological burdens, not just soldiers and leaders, but ordinary people." Brother Kethvin volunteered for the experiment. He was young for a Vellani priest, barely a century old, with the kind of eager curiosity that his elders found both admirable and worrying. Despite the warnings, despite seeing what had happened to Veltar, he insisted on attempting a controlled mental connection with Dr. Kim. The meeting took place in the medical bay, with both human and Vellani doctors monitoring every aspect of the procedure. Veltar sat nearby, his transformed features calm but watchful. "Remember," Dr. Kim said to the young priest, "don't go deep. Stay in the surface thoughts. If you feel resistance, pull back immediately." Brother Kethvin nodded and placed his pale hands on either side of Dr. Kim's head. The human psychologist tried to keep his thoughts simple and peaceful, focusing on his work helping people heal from trauma. The connection formed gently. For a moment, Kethvin experienced the calm satisfaction that Dr. Kim felt when helping patients recover from psychological wounds. Then, inevitably, the young priest began to probe deeper. He found the walls almost immediately. Not the terrible fortress-like barriers that Veltar had described, but something gentler. Partitions that separated different aspects of Dr. Kim's life and experience. Behind one wall, Kethvin sensed memories of failed patients, people who had died by suicide despite his best efforts. Behind another, the guilt of a man who had sometimes chosen to help one patient instead of another, when resources were limited. But unlike Veltar's traumatic experience, Kethvin found that these walls were not prisons. They were organized, structured. Like a library where difficult books were kept in a special section, available when needed, but not overwhelming the reader with their presence. "I see," Kethvin whispered, his eyes still closed. "The walls are not just barriers. They are management systems, ways of organizing pain so it can be useful instead of destructive." Dr. Kim nodded carefully. "We call it compartmentalization. It's how we function despite carrying emotional burdens that would otherwise paralyze us." When the connection ended, Kethvin sat back with wonder in his eyes instead of horror. "It is beautiful," he said to the astonished humans. "Not the pain itself, but the architecture you have built to contain it. You have turned suffering into wisdom, trauma into empathy." The formal diplomatic meeting took place on the neutral station that both fleets had constructed in the space between their ships. Grand Arbiter Yithkala led the Vellani delegation, while Ambassador Nam represented humanity. The station's main chamber was large enough to accommodate both species comfortably, with translation systems and medical equipment standing by. "We have come to understand something disturbing about your species," the Grand Arbiter began without preamble. "Our High Priest's mind was damaged by contact with your thoughts. We must know if this represents a threat to our people." Ambassador Nam had prepared for this moment. With respect, Grand Arbiter, your priest's mind was not damaged. It was expanded. The question is whether that expansion is something your people can learn to handle safely. She gestured to Dr. Kim, who stepped forward with his files. We have studied the incident extensively. High Priest Veltar accessed psychological structures that humans develop over time to manage complex moral and emotional burdens. His mind was not built for that kind of information processing. You speak of burden carrying as if it were a skill, the Grand Arbiter observed. It is, Dr. Kim said simply. Humans learn from childhood how to carry guilt, responsibility, and difficult knowledge without being destroyed by it. We develop these skills because we need them to function in a universe that often forces impossible choices upon us. Veltar, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Grand Arbiter, may I share what I have learned? The ancient leader nodded, and Veltar stood slowly. His movements were still more human than Vallani, but he had found a balance between the two natures now residing in his mind. These humans are not monsters, he said. They are guardians. They have made themselves capable of bearing moral complexity so that others do not have to. Every difficult choice, every necessary evil, every burden of leadership, they internalize these things and continue to function. He walked to the center of the chamber. In our society, we share all burdens equally through our mental links. No individual carries more pain than they can handle because we distribute it among many minds. But humans cannot do this. They must each carry their own burdens alone. And so they have developed ways to organize and manage psychological weight that we never imagined possible. Grand Arbiter Yathkala listened intently. And this makes them dangerous to us? Only if we try to access their thoughts without preparation, Veltar replied. Brother Kethavin has shown that it is possible to connect safely with human minds, if we understand what we are encountering. The danger comes from surprise, from expecting human thoughts to be organized like ours. Ambassador Nam stepped forward. We propose a gradual contact protocol. Joint research into safe telepathic interaction. We can learn from each other. Your mental sharing abilities could help us develop better support systems for our burden carriers, while our psychological organization techniques could help your people process complex experiences without being overwhelmed. The negotiations continued for hours, with both sides working through the implications of their very different approaches to consciousness and responsibility. Gradually, a framework began to emerge. The Vallani would establish a special caste of priest diplomats, trained specifically to interact with human minds safely. These individuals would learn human-style compartmentalization techniques, allowing them to process difficult information without being overwhelmed. In return, humans would work with Vallani telepaths to develop new forms of psychological support. The possibility of truly sharing burdens, even in limited ways, offered hope for human soldiers, leaders, and others who carried heavy responsibilities. There is one more thing, Grand Arbiter Yathkala said, as the formal negotiations drew to a close. Our people must have a name for yours in our histories. What shall we call the species that learned to carry darkness so others could live in light? Ambassador Nam looked around the room at her fellow humans, then at the Vallani who had become their unlikely partners in understanding. We are human, she said simply. That is enough. But Veltar shook his head. In our language, we will call you Shentai, the burden bearers. And we will teach our children to honor you for the sacrifices you make that others never see. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything either species had experienced before. Vallani priests and human psychologists worked together to create a new form of mental connection, one that allowed for true understanding without overwhelming either participant. As the two fleets prepared to depart for their respective homes, carrying news of successful first contact, Veltar remained on the human vessel. His mind had been too changed by the experience to fully return to Volani society, but he had found a new purpose as the first interspecies psychological counselor. "Do you regret it?" Dr. Kim asked him as they watched the Volani ships disappear into hyperspace. The connection? The change? Veltar considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain it caused, but I do not regret the understanding. For the first time in my life, I truly comprehend what strength means, and I have learned that sometimes the greatest courage is not in facing external enemies, but in carrying internal burdens so that others do not have to."